Hello, and welcome to Flunking the Written, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans discuss their favorite show, episode by episode, scene by scene. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Megan, and before we get started, we want all of our listeners to know that this is a fully spoiled podcast. That means at any point during our discussion, we may bring up any part of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spinoff, Angel.
So if you haven't watched both shows and are sensitive to spoilers, go catch up on some of the greatest television ever created and come back here when you're done.
With that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of Flunking the Written. All right, Kimberly, we've made it. It is the season finale of the very first season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It is Prophecy Girl.
Yeah, our first season finale.
I'm so excited.
Yes, me too.
I've been looking forward to this episode for a while, and not just because we've talked a few times about season one being a little awkward of a season and looking forward to later seasons quite a bit, but like this episode specifically stands out as like a really, really good episode of Buffy to this day, and
yes,
respectfully can land in any top 20 Buffy episodes, I think.
Oh, definitely.
I've even seen it in top 10 and didn't argue with it too much.
Oh yeah, there's scenes in here that are some of the best in Buffy.
So, the blurb is, as the spring fling dance approaches, Giles discovers an ancient book foretelling the Slayer's death at the hands of the Master. And of course, this episode is written and directed by Joss Whedon.
Of course.
Of course.
And that's a very simplified blurb, but...
I have a cat that has decided to join me for this podcast. Oh, nope, he left. No. So we start at the Bronze, and Xander is talking to Willow about taking the next step, and then asks, "Would you date me?" And then quickly realizes that is not an appropriate way to ask someone out. And we realize that he is in fact practicing on Willow to ask Buffy out, which is just like the most insensitive, awful thing to do.
Yes, I have in my notes that this seems so cruel.
Like, he knows.
And because he knows that how Willow feels about him. He's discussed it with Buffy before, that he knows. So now he's just kind of messing with her. I mean, like, she's willing to do this for him, but it just seems cruel.
Yeah. I mean, there's parts of this scene I like. I just like Allison Hannigan's performance of just being so, like...
wrapped.
Yeah. She is just so in the moment. And there's a lot of those, like, moments throughout this episode where she kind of is in her own little fog, in her own little world, and she has some great performances. But, yeah, like, watching her and seeing how happy just this pretend scenario is making her, it's really awkward.
Yeah. And a little sad.
But Willow has some good moments throughout this episode. So we're not going to dwell too long on this one. Instead, we're going to go to Buffy,
who is obviously in a fight. As the next scene opens with her flying and hitting the ground.
Either that or she's even more clumsy than I am. But I'm going to go with fight.
And then we go to Cordelia with a guy in a car, kind of making out, and she hears a noise and does the whole, "What was that? Something's out there." And it cuts back to Buffy fighting a vampire, which she stakes, and then mentions that it's her third one that night.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of choreography and scenery and stuff in this fight is really good.
Oh yeah, it's real pretty.
Yeah, very pretty. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it's so pretty. So the guy that Cordelia is parking with is not Mitch. I really thought it was Mitch, and like incorrectly in the last episode discussed that when she said Mitch is gonna die. I was just like, oh, he is. It's just gonna be in the next episode. But apparently no, she traded off to Kevin real fast. I don't know if it's because Mitch was still all black and blue. It's a weird scenario.
She was concerned about him in the pictures. Yeah, maybe Kevin would look better in the pictures.
Kevin looks better, so she decided to switch over to him. But I actually have quite a few things to say about Kevin as we move on. But the first thing that I had to say about him is it's not Mitch, which is my bad. But yeah, 3 in one night, which doesn't seem like a significant number for later seasons of Buffy, but early seasons of Buffy, where you can go a whole week without seeing a vampire, 3 in one night is a whole lot. And she mentions that Giles would be proud, and then we cut to the library, and Giles is reading the book of Slayer prophecies that Angel got him.
Yeah, he recites part of it and discovers something very bad, but then he stops before he says it, and we can just tell he's completely shocked. And he says, oh no, oh no. And then there's an earthquake.
Yep.
And it cuts through all 4 of the scenes we've already seen. Giles runs to the doorway. Buffy, she's out on the school lawn, and she just kind of stands there. It shows Kevin and Cordelia in the car, who just kind of look around. And the most exciting one is it goes back to Xander and Willow in the bronze during the earthquake, which Xander immediately takes charge and grabs Willow and takes her under a staircase.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not sure if under a staircase is the right place to be, but he does kind of take charge.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be like in a doorway or an open area?
I don't know. From what I know about that whole rig they have at the bronze with the balcony and everything, that's not the most sturdy thing to begin with. So
yeah.
But yeah, and then it cuts to the master, and he is just having a big old time, just shouting, it's the final days, glory, glory, and then turns to the anointed one and asks if he thought the earthquake was a 5.1, which...
Very dryly. It's very funny.
It's very funny. Like I said this from the beginning with the master, I love how he can be like this over-dramatic, menacing thing, and also very, very funny.
Yes. Although we mentioned when Giles is in the library during the earthquake scene, it seems like that gets the most damage.
Yeah.
Like giant crack across the floor and all the stacks fall down, like lots of more damage than anywhere else.
Yeah, it is in rough shape.
We go to the next day, which I assume it's the next day, and Buffy comes into the library to talk to Giles and is like, oh wow, look at all the damage.
I love Tony Head's performance through all of this scene.
Yes.
It's so good.
You can just tell something is bothering him. He is upset.
Yeah. That first little bit when she first comes in and he turns and he says her name and he just looks surprised, stunned that she could be there. He's already started to have to process that she's gonna be dead, and so to see her alive is a shocking thing to him. It's just really well acted.
Yeah. And in the conversation, Buffy, tells him that there were 3 vampires last night. One was almost at the school, and Giles is very distracted during most of this he's trying to research some stuff. He's trying to figure out what he read.
Yeah.
I mean, he hears her and mentions that their numbers are increasing, but mostly he's just kind of distracted during it. And then she mentions that she has to go meet her terrible fate, and Giles is like, what? He gets freaked out by that, and Buffy's like, biology.
You gotta have those parallels. High school is hell.
And then in the next scene, Buffy, Xander, and Willow are all walking down the steps of the school and talking about the biology class.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to point out, because this drives me insane, because they do it all the time during Buffy. And this is one of my pet peeves in any show or media of any kind. But Willow and Buffy are dressed for different seasons again.
Yeah. I knew that's where you were going with it.
But I hate it when they do that. It's just, it brings me completely out of the show. But Buffy is wearing a tank top type thing and a mini skirt, and Willow's wearing pants and a long sleeve shirt. And one of them is dressed wrongly for whatever the weather is.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I hate it when they do that. They do it a lot too, but.
Yeah. I do appreciate Willow's owning up to being a science nerd in this little conversation. Even Buffy's like, don't say that. And Willow's like, I'm not ashamed. And then has a little moment of doubt, which is very cute.
It's the computer age. Nerds are in. They're still in, right?
Yeah, they're still in,
that.
Right?
And then Xander mentions that Willow has something to do. And she's like, oh, yeah, I do. And she goes off. And Xander talks to Buffy. Xander basically says he likes her and wants her to go out with him. And Buffy is very, very nice and respectful and just kind of lets him down gently. at which point Xander turns kind of jerky really fast. Which I guess is mostly normal for a 15, 16-year-old guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was nice.
Yeah, she handled it very well. He handled it not so well in places. But I think there's a little bit of defending of Xander I'm going to do here, which is a weird thing to do. But the fact that he actually took the initiative to make the ask, and it didn't go his way and he acted poorly, that's not good. But the fact that he actually just called it for what it was, just said, I like you, I want to go to the dance with you. He got to that point. And I talked about this a little bit earlier in the season, where I think, and this is something that I'm pulling from a couple of scenes from season 2, I think, more than anything right now, is I think that there may be a hint of something that Buffy has for Xander that was squashed very early on in their relationship when she found out that Willow had feelings for Xander.
Yeah.
I think that that's a very real thing that Buffy would do. That
would have been immediate for Buffy.
She might have had a whole different relationship with Xander had Willow not expressed the way that she feels so passionately. And I mean, I've been in that situation where I've met someone and I'm just like, oh, I kind of like this person, and then I realize that somebody who I really care about likes that person so much more than I do, and I'm just like, well, that's great. I'm not even gonna
never mind.
Pulling away from that completely. I think that that's a very real response, but there are hints in season 2 that there might be a little bit of attraction going both ways in that relationship between Buffy and Xander. And so I watched.
I've never seen that.
Oh yeah. We're
gonna have to.
Yeah, there's one very specific.
Talk about that when we get there.
But this here I watched very closely to kind of see how I gauged her reaction, and I think the thing that's always been most telling to me is that when she first starts to reject him, she brings up Willow really fast.
Yeah, that's like the first thing she talks about.
Yeah. And I think that there's something that could be read into that. Now she says, I don't feel this thing. And that's what you're supposed to take at face value when you're interacting with a real person. This is a character, so we can kind of infer and play around with, internal emotions and how they really feel. But when she tells Xander, hey, I don't feel a thing, that should be it for Xander, right? Xander should just stop at that point. Just because that is the courtesy and the consent that is required in any relationship. If somebody says, I don't feel that way about you, that's when you stop. And in a way, that's when Xander begins to go down the path of being okay with just being friends with Buffy, but it takes him a long time to really get there.
Yeah. Well, when he says that you either feel a thing or you don't, I kind of have in my notes that he should have known that she didn't. Now, I know you just mentioned that there's some mixed signals in season 2, and I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I'm sure we'll talk about them when we get there. And it might just be something I didn't notice, but I don't feel like there's been any up to this point.
Yeah.
Because she had her little obsessive crush on Owen, and then she was all about Angel, and she's never given Xander any kind of encouragement or sign that she was into him that way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Xander's aware that Willow and Buffy are best friends. He knows that Willow's in love with him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he would think Buffy would do that to her best friend.
Yeah, and that's the real thing.
So there's no reason here for him to think that this would have happened. And that being said,
other than Buffy he's a 16-year-old boy who's just hopeful.
Yeah, but Buffy and Xander, I feel like they would be terrible together.
Oh, very possibly. But
he would never let her be the Slayer.
Yeah.
I feel like he would have always want to control what she does and would get upset when she took charge and told him what to do. He would always be getting hurt trying to protect her. I just think they would be terrible.
Definitely at this stage. I could maybe see an argument for season 7 Xander and Buffy being a thing. But definitely at this stage, it would just be a terrible relationship. Xander has way too much maturing to do before he can get even close to Buffy. And like I've mentioned before, I think they are the ultimate what if scenario, right? That there's so much placed into these two as a possible romantic relationship in these early seasons, and you don't get the actual closure that you do with Willow and Xander, where Willow and Xander get together and it's the most awful thing to get ever, but it actually happens. You don't get anything like that with Buffy and Xander. It is that ultimate, like, what would they be like together, and when would be the appropriate time for them to be together.
I don't want to know what they would be like. I'm happy with them never have gotten together. Xander leaves and he's all upset. And then Buffy's left sitting there feeling bad.
Which is just the worst, isn't it? Can we just talk about how awful it is to be played as the meanie for rejecting somebody who asks you out? You know, like, you didn't Buffy didn't ask for that, but she is left feeling like the bad guy in that scenario. And that
she hurt her best friend. Yeah. And there is a scene here in the script book that was cut out, which is a rain of pebbles. Like, it starts immediately after Xander walks off. They're in the courtyard at the school, and it starts raining rocks. Okay. They all look around, and it shows a lot of students run for cover, and Buffy runs under the archway, and students start talking about, it's raining stones. And Xander says, figures, and just walks off. But it literally rains stones. And I guess they cut that one out for time, because I think that would have probably been pretty funny and fitting with the episode. So.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I always find like these scenes that are cut out seem like they're most of the time like weird and wouldn't make sense in the show. But I imagine most scripts, like when you just like hear what the idea of the scene is, don't really make sense until you see it executed. So it could have been really cool. I don't know. It seems very silly to me though. A rain of pebbles.
Well, I think they were going for one of those apocalypse end of the world things.
Absolutely.
But there are several full scenes that were cut out of this episode. But then the next scene is Giles's office, and Miss Calendar, who we haven't seen in a little while, comes in. We pretty much see everybody in this episode. Mm-hmm. And he's on the phone talking to someone and tells them to come after sundown, which kind of gives us a hint that it might be Angel. And he turns around and sees Miss Calendar, and they have a little talk about everything that's going on, and Miss Calendar mentions some very freaky things that have been happening. And during this, she mentions the things that she's read on the internet about the occult that have been happening. And some of the conversation is cut, and I think it's part of the best part of the conversation.
Oh, okay.
Because she mentions that a cat last week gave birth to a litter of snakes. And then she immediately goes on to another thing. But in the script book, it says, and they promptly ate her.
Oh.
Then that a family was swimming in Whisper Lake when the lake suddenly began to boil. And then it says that 2 people basically boiled to death. And then it says that Mercy Hospital last night, a boy was born with his eyes facing inward. And Giles, this part was cut out. It says, Giles says, where did all these take place? What countries? And Miss Calendar says, all of these things happened within 3 miles of here. No, that was also cut out. But I actually think that those lines in that conversation that were cut out were kind of important.
Poor kitty.
I know, right? Poor cat. No.
I haven't moved on from the kitty being eaten by her newly hatched snakes.
Her snake babies.
Her snake babies turned on her.
Miss Calendar is like, what's going on? Giles says he doesn't know if he can trust her. And she reminds him about Moloch and help him with that. And they discuss basically what's going on. So, yeah, there's that scene. Which it just occurred to me, and I did not think about this when I was watching the episode, but this is the first time Miss Calendar and Angel are together. Uh-huh. And I wish I had thought about that when I was rewatching the episode so I could look and see if she had any, surprising facial expressions or anything when she saw him.
Yeah, I didn't think to
when
look
he
for
walked
that
into the
one.
library.
I don't think there was, but I'd have to go back and watch. I didn't think to look at that one. I looked at when she was talking about Buffy being the Slayer. I watched her pretty closely during that, and I could see, maybe there would be a way that you could tell that she's she may have been more in the know in that than she appeared to be in that conversation, but it doesn't really read either way, like we've said.
And see, I'm still not convinced that she knows about the Slayer and that it's Buffy and all that, because she would know about Angel and his history and who he was and that he's getting too happy. But like, there's never any indication that she knew anything else.
Yeah,
her people might actually even know about Slayers and the lore and everything, but there's no reason or indication that she would know that it was Buffy until Giles tells her.
Yeah.
You know, but she could have.
Yeah.
We never really find out.
I truly believe that if they had planned for Ginny to be meant to be with the Gypsy clan all along from the beginning, they would have planted more seeds. And it probably would have indicated stuff like she knew things about Buffy or something like that, because that's just who she interacts with for the most part. So those are like the obvious places to plant seeds. So I think that if they had planned it ahead a little bit, she probably would have known that Buffy was the Slayer from the beginning, or at least known that she was perhaps one to watch because she was getting close to Angel. Maybe not specifically that she was the Slayer, but all of this is just kind of retconned in season 2 when they decide to put Ginny on that path. So none of it's really foreshadowed. I think we're looking for a lot of things that aren't going to be there at all, but it's fun to look for just to see if there might be some happy accidents.
Just to see if it was there. Yeah. Right. And the next scene is Kevin and Cordelia again, and they're walking down the hall and discussing getting ready for the dance at the Bronze and how everything's in the AV room, the sound system and decorations and stuff. And they do some really sweet flirting. Mm-hmm. And then Cordelia talks to Willow and asks Willow for a favor, if she could come in the morning and set up the sound system. Cordelia says, I mean, I'd be really grateful. I'd even talk to you at the dance, which... very, very Cordelia and condescending. Willow's real distracted and just says, sure. And they make a plan to meet tomorrow. And this is it's not really an important scene. That's basically all that happens. But Willow's distraction was that she had seen Xander, and she goes into a classroom where Xander is there bouncing a ball off the wall, and start talking about Xander having asked Buffy out. And Xander tells her it went horrible, and yeah. And then ask Willow to go to the dance as his backup.
God.
I know what we'll do. We can go. Be my date. We'll have a great time. We'll dance. We'll go wild. What do you say?
No.
Good. What?
There's no way.
Willow, come on.
You think I want to go to the dance with you and watch you wish you were at the dance with her? You think that's my idea of hijinks? You should know better.
But you know what, Willow? She stands up for herself.
Bless
and
her.
she's no.
Bless her.
And in my notes, I have good for you, Willow.
Yeah.
She basically tells him there's no way, and then says, I'm sorry it didn't work out for you, and bye. Which, yay, Willow.
Yay, Willow. One dialogue moment that really stood out to me this viewing from Xander is when, like, Willow's trying to get more details and ask, like, what did Buffy say? And Xander says something along the lines of, apart from no, does it really matter? And that's something that really stood out to me this time through. I was just like, he is just so black and white about all of this stuff. Like,
about everything.
That's something that, like, we've talked about a little bit. Like, he just completely hates the vampires with no real exceptions, right? That's a very black and white area for him.
Yeah, vampires bad. No gray area.
And when it comes to having a relationship with Buffy, it's like, in his mind at this point, and he definitely grows out of this, but at this point, it really feels like what he's saying here is, if she's not willing to date me, then what's the point in hearing anything that she has to say? Which is just a horrible, horrible thing to say about someone who's supposed to be like one of your best friends. And then to turn around and ask your other best friend, who you know feels that way about you, to be your consolation prize for the dance, your backup.
Yeah.
This is one of those moments where Xander's
And then
really just the stinker that puts a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. And then when Willow leaves, he kind of like acts like he was rejected again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you don't get to do this with Willow, because that was way beyond cruel. But yeah. So then the next scene is Buffy again, and this is the lead up to, as far as I'm concerned, one of the top 10 scenes in Buffy ever.
For me, like, the thing that I made 2 notes about this lead up is that, one, wow, students really never leave this school, because there's just students casually running around Buffy while she's walking through
that is one of the things that Principal Snyder will not allow is students loitering after school hours.
No, absolutely not. Never. But she's also, like, super casually walking around with a stake. Like, at this point, I guess she's just has this reputation and she's not denying it anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
She's just like, do, I'm gonna sit my steak on the sink and just leave it out there. But yeah, she goes to turn on the faucet and it's blood. And then it cuts.
We needed another sign that the apocalypse is on the way.
The pebbles didn't work out, so the blood works out. But it cuts to the library and she walks in saying, Giles, you're not going to believe this, and hears and sees tall, dark, and forehead.
Yes. Yes, Angel talking to Angel talking to Giles. And she's all, Angel?
It's the first time she's seen him since they kissed. And he got a scar on his chest.
And she stands there listening because she realizes they're talking about her, and hears Giles say that she is going to die tomorrow. Tomorrow, Buffy will face the Master and she will die.
And then we get to the scene. The scene.
Yes. I don't even know how to describe this scene because it's really great.
So that's it, huh? I remember the drill. One Slayer dies, next one's called. Wonder who she is. Will you train her? Or will they send someone else?
Buffy,
To say how he's gonna kill me? Do you think it'll hurt? Don't touch me! You even gonna tell me?
I was hoping that I wouldn't have to, that there was some way around it.
I've got a way around it. I quit.
It's not that simple.
I'm making it that simple. I quit. I resign. I'm fired. You can find someone else to stop the Master from taking over.
I'm not sure that anyone else can. All the signs indicate...
Signs? Read me the signs! Tell me my fortune! You're so useful sitting here with all of your books! You're really a lot of help!
No, I don't suppose I am.
I know this is hard.
What do you know about this? You're never gonna die.
You think I want anything to happen to you? Huh? Do you think I could stand it? We just gotta figure out a way.
I already did. I quit, remember? Pay attention.
Buffy, if the Master rises...
I don't care! I don't care. Giles, I'm 16 years old. I don't want to die.
The thing about this scene is that there's multiple moments that I can point out that are just phenomenal. And I feel like every time I watch it, I have a new, like, favorite line or a favorite reaction or something. Like, there's just so much layered in here. And, like, her reaction, starting with the laughter and then, you know, kind of retreating and dealing with the denial and the anger that comes with this realization that she's, you know, prophesized to die at the hands of the Master. And knowing this time watching through and really paying attention to Giles through the front and knowing that this is something that Giles has been carrying for a while and something that Angel just found out and is also kind of in that denial portion of the realization of what's going to happen, and seeing all these different angles from these different characters. But this is, I think, when we're most reminded how young Buffy is. And it real, like, you just kind of want to, like, hug her and be like, it's okay, we'll protect you. Like, she just, she seems so vulnerable in this moment. And seeing her just grow stronger throughout this season, and seeing her be just so phenomenal at what she does at the beginning of this episode, and being so mature in that moment with Xander earlier, and then having this where you just realize, oh yeah, she 16.
Is just 16. Yeah. And there are just so many awesome lines during this.
I think there's two lines that I'm gonna point out that aren't like the super obvious lines, but one of the lines that I think is delivered so well and is so powerful, but kind of gets overshadowed by some of the bigger, more quotable lines, is the "Do you think it will hurt?" line that she gives, which just breaks my heart every time I hear it. And then a personal favorite of mine, and possibly one of my most quoted Buffy quotes of all time, is "I quit, I resign, I'm fired," which is usually what I say when I'm very exasperated and I'm just done. I say that all the time.
The one that gets me the most is when she first gets started and she says, "One Slayer dies, the next is called. I wonder who the next one is." And then she looks at Giles and says, "Are you going to train her, or will they send someone else?" And that one gets me every time. I'm like, oh, she's wondering, am I just going to be replaced? Will Giles care? Yeah.
And coming off of that scene that we got from Giles in Nightmares, and knowing just how hard that hit him, and that little moment that he gave there, there's a lot of cool things that kind of led up. There's a lot more foreshadowing to Buffy's death in season 1 than I thought there was, when I'm watching specifically for little hints, and some of them are fairly subtle, but there's a lot of stuff that point to this moment, this reveal, and it's beautifully performed.
Yes.
David Boreanaz is there, and he carries some of the weight, but it's Buffy. It's Sarah and Tony's show for the most part. Like, I mean, Tony Head does a great job with some of like when she starts throwing the books, and Tony's reaction to that is so good. Of just almost wanting the books to hit him. It feels like he starts to pull back, and then he just kind of like just freezes in place. You can tell throughout this first season, but specifically in this episode, just how willing Giles is to die for Buffy. Like we talked about, Buffy's role is to protect the world, Giles' role is to protect Buffy. And that has come through again and again. And I think, for me, like, the best relationship of season 1 is Giles and Buffy. And this scene is like
amazing.
The climax of that. It's so powerful and hard.
And at the end of this scene, she rips off the cross that Angel gave her, and she just leaves, and they watch her leave. And then we kind of have a short little scene where we check in on everybody. We have Willow's bedroom where she's kind of doing homework, and then looks at a picture of her and Xander and picks up the phone to call him. And then we're in Xander's room looking at him laying in his bed listening to Patsy Cline.
Yeah. We got Patsy Cline going. And then we transition also musically in a kind of awkwardly transition from Patsy Cline to Jonathan Brooke. Inconsolable is playing while Buffy is looking at a photo album of childhood photos, which just way to twist the knife after that scene.
And then Buffy's mom comes in and asks her if she's okay, and Buffy just kind of impulsively asks her mom if they can go away for the weekend. I guess thinking if she's not there, it won't happen.
That draw to run away, that instinct of just, I don't want to be here. I'm just going to say, points to Joyce for being, like, observant enough to realize that Buffy's going through some stuff, because Buffy's got to be going through stuff all the time.
Yeah, and Joyce remembers that the prom, also known as Spring Fling, is tomorrow night, and ask her if anyone asked her, like, invited her, and Buffy's like, someone, but Joyce says not the right someone. See, I actually do know what you're thinking sometimes. And I'm like, well, you know, if it was any other daughter but Buffy, you'd probably have that right. Buffy's got a little bit more on her mind. Then Joyce reveals that she bought a very expensive gown that Buffy was looking at in the store for her to wear, and talks her into going to the dance by herself.
Fun fact, Sarah Michelle Gellar recently revealed that she still owns this dress.
Really?
Yeah. She took a picture in it for Facebook and confirmed that it was the actual dress that she wore in the show.
Nice.
We get a little background on Joyce and Hank, which is always interesting, the little nuggets that we get, that they met at homecoming, Joyce's first year of college, and she didn't have a date and he did, and it's a very funny story that she will not be sharing.
Yeah.
Ever since that scene that you read from the episode Angel, where they clearly had some ideas that they didn't want to go down, I'm always interested in the little nuggets of Buffy's parents and that backstory. Anything really before Sunnydale is always interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, if there's any more in any of the script books, I will let you know.
I'm ready.
Speaking of the script books, the next scene was cut.
Oh.
And it is a scene where Angel is in his apartment, in his bed, and he wakes up to find Colin sitting at the foot of his bed.
Huh.
Yes. And they have a fairly long conversation about people and why Angel would want to be like people. Colin says, he said you live like one of them. I don't understand it. And Angel says, maybe when you're older. They talk a little bit more, and Angel asks Colin if the master sent him, and he said he's coming soon. Stay out of his way. Angel says, why should I? And Colin says, because he doesn't like you anymore. And Colin gets off the bed and starts to leave, and then looks back at Angel and says, you know what he could do to you? And Angel, with a trace of fear in his voice, says yes. And Colin says, no, you don't. And then leaves. So the master, they were going to put in a scene where the master sends Colin to threaten Angel. And that got cut out.
That would have been super intriguing. I think we eventually get to know so much about Angel's backstory that, you know, a little scene like that doesn't seem like it would add a whole lot to the overall. But, like, watching through your first time, if that scene had been in there, you'd be like, ooh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I find that one fascinating that they didn't put that in.
So from there, we cut to the school with Cordelia and Willow. And Cordelia's talking about how Kevin flaked out on her, and they're trying to track him down. And Willow's like, it's not a big deal. And Cordelia's like, no, you don't understand. I think it's cute. And she's just disgusted with herself.
For thinking it's cute. Yeah.
But they go to the AV room. And, like, here's the, like, timeline or connections or whatever that I'm trying to figure out. But, like, where does Kevin really, like, fit into the social hierarchy here? Because is he an AV nerd? Is he just friends with some AV nerds? Or, like, the AV nerds cool in this?
Well, no, I think he was just going to get the stuff.
Well, yeah. Did he just hit it at just the perfect time when I guess he was there towards the doorway? I don't know. Like, it was confusing to me for multiple reasons. But, like, I think the line where she's just like, oh, they're watching cartoons, that's cute. It almost makes it seem like she would expect Kevin to just be hanging out in the AV room watching cartoons with the AV nerds.
But we don't know that they're the AV nerds. They might be Kevin's friends helping him move stuff to the bronze, you know?
I just want, like, a weird version of Sunnydale High where the AV nerds are super cool.
Well, when they open the door, everyone is dead. Horribly, horribly dead. And Willow is just kind of shocked, and You would think Cordelia is cursed with everyone she dates. Yeah.
Yeah, she got a bad track record. She's up there with Buffy on just terrible relationships.
There's some very creepy imagery with a bloody handprint on the screen, the TV screen that's still playing cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of see Willow standing there in shock at the carnage around her, and it cuts to Buffy standing in front of the mirror in her bedroom with her dress on, and it's still morning at this time. Well, would it still be morning at this time?
That's another thing that I don't know what day of the week it is, like, what's going on.
Because they were supposed to meet at the Bronze at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming they waited a little while, so it might be afternoon by now.
Yeah.
And then it's had time to get on the news because Joyce comes running in and says, there's something on the news, it's Willow. So I'm guessing it's been a few hours. So it might be late afternoon, evening by now.
Yeah. But here's my okay, I'm gonna go back to the AV room thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, because I think there's an argument to say that Kevin may be like a huge AV nerd. Because if he was supposed to go and pick up the stuff to meet them at 10, then he shouldn't have been there during the time when vampires could have been there. Plus, it's probably a Saturday based on the timeline. It makes sense that maybe the dance was Saturday night.
Well, no one's in school that day.
Yeah,
so
no one seems to be in school that day, so it seems to be a Saturday. But there's a lot of students in that AV room. So I don't know if they gathered, like, Friday night to, like, hang out and watch cartoons. And that's why I think Kevin is an AV nerd. I think Kevin is an AV nerd.
Possibly. But then I don't really see him dating Cordelia, or Cordelia dating him.
Yeah. Maybe he's a closet AV nerd.
Maybe. Or maybe he was picking the stuff up Friday night. I don't think we'll ever know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
But there's also a line from Willow where she's talking about, you know, she goes into that room every day, that she knows those people. So, like, she was familiar with some of the students that were in that room. So,
yeah.
She's definitely an AV
Buffy.
nerd, which we come to expect from her.
We do know, yeah. You know, Willow, when she's talking to Buffy about it, she doesn't know about the prophecy that Buffy will die at this point. And she kind of unwittingly talks Buffy into going up against the Master. I mean, she doesn't, like, say anything, but Buffy realizes that she's the only one that can possibly stop this. And her best friend being so upset at what she saw kind of makes her realize what she has to do. Yeah.
And this is also the first, I believe it's the first of two different beats throughout. One is a 3-beat for sure, where Willow says, "Hey, I like your dress," which is the classic one that I knew from many, many viewings back. But this is also, Willow mentions it wasn't our world, they made it theirs. And that starts a through line. And I don't know how many beats it hits. I didn't count them up. But the Master repeats again and again that it's going to be his world. And this is this idea of the vampires taking over. And we see that in The Wish. When we get to that episode, we see that version of the world
that the Master would have created.
The Master would have created. But it's interesting that that's a dialogue that they have at several points in this episode, is this idea of it isn't going to be our world, it's going to be their world if the Master is successful, if the Master wins.
Then we have a quick little scene with the Master where he's standing underground and keeps repeating soon.
Yeah. He sends Colin out and is just really fixated on that word.
Yeah. And then we cut to the library, and Giles is with Miss Calendar and packing weapons.
Yeah.
And they're talking, and we realize Miss Calendar knows everything now. So he apparently filled her in off screen. And she's talking about how she can't believe Buffy's the Slayer because she's so little.
Yep. She's so little.
And she mentions that we should warn Buffy about the vampire that will lead her to the Master, and that it's possibly a little child.
Well, then we need to warn her.
I don't intend involving her at all.
What do you mean?
Buffy's not going to face the Master. I am.
No, you're not.
this is another very powerful scene where Giles and Buffy kind of argue about who's going to do this and change my mind. And Buffy says, I know, and punches Giles until he punches him and he passes out.
Yeah.
And I love this next line she says to Miss Calendar. She takes the cross that she had pulled off the night before and puts it on. And then she says, when he wakes up, tell him, I don't know, think of something cool, tell him I said it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that line. I just love it.
Good line. I love that Buffy is just fully accepting of her fate at this point. There almost seems to be like a level of peace that she has in this moment. And then when she actually gets down and she's facing off with the Master, we get the fear again. But this moment of being so determined to do what she can, and that line of just like, you know, maybe I'll take him with me, again, I think shows just how mature a Slayer has to be, and why we tend to look at Buffy as being much older than she is, because this feels almost like the opposite of, like, in the scene before, you're reminded that she's 16 years old, and then in this scene here, you're reminded that she's the Slayer.
Mm-hmm. And in this scene, I agree completely, but in this scene, Miss Calendar tells her, if you fight the Master, you'll die. And I know we've already discussed it, but I have in my notes here, and I thought I would mention it again. If Miss Calendar does already know that Buffy is the reason that Angel is getting happy, because we know now she knows that Buffy is the Slayer, that Slayers exist and all that. And we find out in season 2 that she's been sent there to watch Angel.
Uh-huh.
If she does know that it's because of Buffy that Angel is getting happy, like, does she want Buffy to die? Like, is this something she's rooting for in this scene?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
I thought that when I heard her say it, and I was like, oh.
I seem to remember her specifically, like, not knowing how the curse was gonna be broken, though. Like, I seem to, like... Because she has a moment where, like, when Buffy comes after her in season 2, she says, I didn't know exactly. Like, she knew that there was something that she was going to be watching for, but she didn't know the exact rules of how it worked.
Well, she knew she was sent because he was getting too happy. There's a scene where it reveals that.
Yeah.
I very clearly remember that. So I'm guessing she doesn't know that it was because of Buffy.
I think I need to, and we've talked about watching Jenny more on this watch there. I was like, I think I need the full context of Jenny before I can speculate on any of these scenes, if there's anything to be inferred here. But, like, I think it gets a lot muddier later on, but I think her goal has always been to drive those two apart, and she really goes for that in season 2. But I don't think she would have ever gotten to the point of hoping that Buffy would die.
Well, now see, and I don't know that Miss Calendar would have, but I think the other people in her tribe maybe would have.
Very possible. Very possible. I don't like the only other. I mean, we just get her uncle. I think is the only other that we ever really get any characterization from. But he is very staunchly vengeance, vengeance, vengeance at all costs, vengeance. So very possible that they would have been fine with Buffy dying if that meant that they could continue on with their vengeance of Angelus.
Angel. Buffy exits the school and she walks outside, and it's dark, so I guess it means it was kind of late afternoon, evening when she talked to Willow. She sees Colin, and he kind of helped me, pretending to be lost child. And Buffy's like, yeah, I know who you are. You don't have to, put on the show. And so he takes her hand and they walk off together. So she's going to face the Master. And then the next scene we have, it's been a little while because Xander and Willow are now with Giles and Miss Calendar.
And Giles is conscious when we knew
Giles
that was
is conscious again. And they all now know about the prophecy and everything and are trying to figure out what to do to help her. And they make some pretty funny remarks about Miss Calendar being part of the group now.
Yeah. I'm not sure about Willow's remarks, though. Because, one, Willow should like Miss Calendar. Is in her class, is a big computer nerd, all that stuff, right? But also knows, or should know, that Miss Calendar was key in, helping them defeat Moloch, who was, Willow's main antagonist for this season.
Well, you would think so, but, those things were happening in 2 different areas, so maybe she didn't know. Well, maybe Giles didn't tell the kids.
I don't know if it ever, communicated. I know, Buffy and Xander knew, because because they were the ones that told Giles to get Ginny in on it.
True.
So, but like, I was just like, Willow, you would totally be cool with Ginny being part of the club.
Well, maybe she doesn't want too many people to know because it won't be as special.
Oh, she's just selfish.
Xander decides he's going to go help Buffy and leaves. And it switches to Colin leading Buffy through the tunnels. And then Xander knocking on Angel's apartment door.
Okay, how does Xander know where Angel lives?
Which is a very good question, and I don't know. And Angel has a comment here about everybody's visiting me lately. I really should clean the place up. That was cut because, the other visit didn't happen. And Xander tells Angel that Buffy's gone to meet the Master. Angel says he'll kill her. And they're like, we have to do something. And Xander wants Angel to take him to find the Master. And Angel's like, he'll kill you. No. And Xander grabs a cross and holds it up in front of Angel's face. And Angel kind of moves back and makes like a hissing noise.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's weird for me because crosses usually aren't an issue for Angel. Like, he's got, a scar or like a burn on his chest from the one that Buffy wore,
Yeah, but there was a certain amount of pleasure going on to counterbalance that.
Well, yeah. And Xander does a little speech about helping Buffy, and I love these lines because Angel says you're in love with her. And Xander says, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty good thing. So they leave to go try to find Buffy and the Master. And we go back to the library with Willow, Giles, and Miss Calendar. And they're trying to figure out where the Hellmouth is and start, looking to see where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little clip that's cut out here where Miss Calendar says, how big is a Hellmouth anyway? And Giles says, I don't know, Hellmouth sized.
There you go.
Not really an important one, but kind of funny.
But there's nothing cut out here about Willow?
No.
Okay, because I'm trying to make sure that this is the right... Yeah, this is the right place, I think. Willow's just kind of in a fog in this scene. And I wasn't sure if there was, like, a reasoning for that, or if it was just a decision that they made on set to make her be just still kind of dazed from the day's events and, like, the morning and everything. But she
says it says in the script book that Willow is staring at the door in a daze, worrying about Xander.
Oh.
So, yeah.
See, I didn't connect it to worrying about Xander so much as trying to figure out, like, is she still just reeling from seeing all of her, AV friends dead this morning? Like, is she revisiting that memory? But, like, she's definitely, like, out of it.
Yeah. There's nothing cut out, but it does have a description that she's supposed to be acting that way.
Mm-hmm.
That being worried.
I thought it was an interesting choice because she doesn't really seem too much out of her sorts in the previous scene. And then they have this scene where she's like really out of her sorts. And then she kind of gets back on track.
Xander left to go after the Master.
She's worried about Xander, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, Xander.
Yep. And then we have the scene where the Master and Buffy meet each other.
Yes. The feeble banter portion of the fight.
Yes.
I love the shot that she takes. She just goes for it. Yeah. I love that he snatches it and compliments her on the shot. Like, it's just a really nice, wholesome back and forth of two people trying to murder each other.
Yeah. And then we cut to a scene with Angel and Xander, which is some very nice comic relief where Xander kind of accuses Angel of wanting to eat him, which is pretty funny. And we go back to the Master and Buffy where they do a little bit more banter, a little bit more talk about the fight and the prophecy and stuff. And then again, back to the library where they kind of work it out where they think the Hellmouth is at the Bronze. And that's where the Master's going to go. So Willow and Miss Calendar leave to go to the Bronze to warn everyone at the prom. And then we go back to Buffy and the Master, where they're playing a little bit of hide and seek with each other, wandering around the cavern. And the Master says, I want this moment to last. And Buffy says, I don't. And then grabs her from behind, knocks the crossbow out of her hand, and says, I understand.
Legitimately, like, super creepy. I want this moment to last. Super creepy.
Yeah. And then we're back to Willow and Miss Calendar, who realize that they are not going to the Bronze because they are outside the school and surrounded by vampires.
So many vampires.
So many. And they kind of look like zombies.
Yeah.
The way they're moving and walking and stuff. It's like they're much more like zombies than vampires.
Yeah. And save like the obvious ones, like the uber vamps from season 7. Like, I don't think there's many moments where we see this many vampires on screen, like in the same area throughout this. Like, this is a pretty significant amount of vampires. I think possibly Graduation Day maybe has...
that probably has about the same, maybe more.
Has another bulk of vampires. But other than that, like, this is a lot of vampires. And now I'm just going, like, maybe Giles was right all the time. Maybe Master is the vampire king. He's definitely got some pull.
Yep.
So back to the Master and Buffy, and as Buffy's trying to get away, the Master pulls her, like, almost telekinetically, although it's compared to hypnosis later on in the episode, where she's just frozen in place, and then he comes and grabs her, and reveals, in a very, very sad, extreme close-up of Sarah Michelle Gellar as she's crying, that it is in fact the fact that she came to fight him that allowed him to be set free. And he goes and bites her, and then is very delighted and screams the power. And then Buffy falls forward into a pool, and here is our second beat of I Like Your Dress. And the Master easily breaks free after that. Never really fully explained why the Slayer's blood is the just magic ingredient, but we'll accept it. I know that when it was the vessel storyline with Luke, he was drawing power from blood, and we know that Slayer blood is super powerful, so that
very powerful. Yeah,
makes sense. But I feel like there could have been an easy line there to help cement that. But yeah, that Slayer blood is all he needed. He breaks free from the barrier that's held him down for so long, and presumably that also starts to break apart all the barriers that are keeping the Hellmouth closed at that point. Again, the magic doesn't make complete sense there, but we'll go with it. And Angel and Xander see the flashy lights and realize that they're too late, and they run into the cavern and see Buffy down in the pool of water, and Angel pulls her out and declares that she's dead.
And Xander says, if she's drowned, there's a shot, CPR, at which Angel explains that Xander has to do it because I have no breath.
Which is stupid!
And contradicted multiple times.
Oh, gosh.
Throughout the Buffyverse.
As he's panting very heavily, I have no breath. It's like you're speaking, you're seen smoking, like later on in the show. I mean, there's so many things that show that vampires have the capacity to move oxygen in and out of their lungs.
Yeah. But it makes for a nice tension here.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
I would have I think this scene would have worked fine without this line. This line of I have no breath, which is totally just dumb. Because I think it works even better if it's not the fact that Angel can't do it, it's the fact that Angel doesn't think to do it. Like, Xander's the one who's just like, oh, CPR, and like Angel just kind of freezes, and like Xander takes control of the situation and starts performing CPR. I think that would have played out even better to kind of show, again, a sense of Xander in the moments when it really matters can come through and can't, but like the fact that he kind of suggests it, but then Angel has to kind of like force him into doing it, whereas Xander, had he just completely taken control of the situation and been like, no, I'm not letting her die, and done the CPR and rescued her that way, I think that would have been even more powerful. But instead we have this line that's completely contradicts itself again and again and again.
Yes, yeah. But they do CPR, or Xander does CPR, because he's the one with breath, and basically brings her back. And we cut to Miss Calendar and Willow surrounded by vampires outside the school. And Cordelia shows up in a car and tells them to get in. And they decide they have to get to the library. So Cordelia drives into the school to the library.
So kind of a weird, somber moment that's in this scene. But like when Cordelia's explaining why she's there, she says, I was sitting where Kevin and I used to park, and these things started coming out of nowhere or started attacking me or something like that. And I'm just like, aw, she was sitting where she and Kevin used to park? Just sitting there all sad.
Instead of going to the prom.
Well, she really did like him.
Yeah.
That little AV nerd stole her heart.
They drive like straight up to the library, jump out, run in, and the vampires are right behind them, and they start barricading the door.
Which, by the way,
They do not know how to barricade doors in this show.
Not even that. In the episode just prior to this, those doors open out. So in between the two episodes, somebody took down those doors or reinstalled them in such a way that they could only open in, which would never be up to code. Those doors are supposed to open out. Mm-hmm. But it just allowed them to be able to actually barricade them in this episode. It's like Joss Whedon wrote, they barricade themselves in the library, and then the set design guys are like, all right.
And then we see the master walking on the edge of the roof of the school, which, did he come out of the Hellmouth? And if he did, how come no one saw him go through the library? Otherwise, how'd he get in the school?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, he came through a probably similar tunnel system that Buffy did, but he also, like, the branching paths. I don't know, like, what kind of labyrinth is down there. There's apparently a whole maze down there to where he could go out one way and get back up, whereas Xander and Angel could come in a completely different way, and they never crossed paths. And then he got all the way up to the surface and up to the roof. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath Sunnydale High.
True. We go back to Buffy and Xander and Angel, and they're telling her to be careful because she's weak, and she's like, no, I feel strong, I feel different. And she's like, let's go. Uh-huh. She's ready to go get the master. She's ready to fight.
I feel different is such an interesting word choice there.
Because she's, brought back from the dead.
Yeah. I feel different is such an interesting word choice. And I noticed, especially at the end, but this is the first touch of this perhaps foreshadowing to the arc that she goes over through the summer and then in the first episode of season 2 of just having this weird identity crisis or like not feeling like herself. And that I feel different, I think is very telling right from the get-go that she says, I feel different.
Well, I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, pretty traumatic stuff to go through.
And here in the library, they're still fighting the vampires trying to get in. And then they start fighting giant monsters trying to come out of the floor as the Hellmouth opens. And something really interesting, but it mentioned this in the script book. They, at the end where the master's body turns to ash, except for his bones, apparently in season 1, they used the bulk of the budget for that. And they did not really have a big budget for the monsters. It didn't allow for computer generated images of the monsters coming out. So those tentacles, like the big heads tentacles on that monster, are all costumes. And each one of them has a human being inside.
Just flailing about.
Yes. Every one of them has a person inside that's controlling it. They're not, like, that's a real thing that's not computer.
Some quality practical effects.
I mean, you can't really tell.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
They're definitely not the most egregious of the special effects that we see in the first season.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah. Even later on, honestly.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Buffy and the guys they're walking back to the school. There's a really awesome scene where she's very confident and knows exactly what she's doing and everything, walking toward the school.
So how do you feel about the Buffy theme playing in this?
I think it was really cool how they did that. Kind of reminding us she's the Slayer, get the mood right for this final fight. They don't ever do that again that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it always sticks out like a sore thumb a little bit to me, but I don't necessarily mind it. It's just, it seems out of place in a way that I'm okay with. Like, I always sense. Just like, like it doesn't feel like something that should be there, but I'm okay with it being there.
Well, every time I watch this and it happens, I was like, oh, that's the theme song. They're playing the theme song during the show. It works. And then I just, it's okay because it works, but they get to the roof axis and she goes up and she tells them to wait there and keep the rest of the vampires off of her.
Which, I mean, Buffy's commanding and I could totally buy that she could force them to do that. But I feel like the fact that they just so easily agree to this, to letting Buffy go and face the master alone again. Like, I feel like there'd be maybe just a touch more argument there than there is. Like, I think ultimately Buffy would win that argument, and they'd be like, okay. But, like, the fact that they're just like, yeah, cool, you just died. Go ahead and fight the guy that killed you.
Well, I think maybe it's how she's acting.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's supposed to be so clearly powerful to the audience that it does, like, you don't really think about the fact that Angel may want to, like, be like, oh yeah, I would totally, like, want to go and fight by your side in this scenario.
Yeah.
And Xander definitely would. I mean, Xander doesn't have any sense.
And meanwhile, while this happens, the group in the library is still fighting vampires and monsters from the Hellmouth. Although it's a very funny scene where Cordelia bites a vampire.
Yeah.
It says, see how you like it.
She just now, like, I think has pieced it all together that vampires are real. Like, she's interacted with vampires before, because obviously she was one of the victims in The Harvest, or one of the potential victims of The Harvest. But, like, she's just now fully processed that, like, oh yeah, vampires are real. And then her instinct after that is just like, I'm gonna bite one of them. I'm just like, you go, Cordy.
Like, yeah. And then we have Buffy and the Master on the roof for the big showdown.
And here he mentions again, come forth into my world, when he's talking to the demons coming out of the Hellmouth. And there's just great line after great line in this little section here. But Buffy immediately says, I don't think it's yours just yet. Which, like, this watch through, because I was noticing that world repeat like, this is the time I was just like, oh, that's a good line there, Buffy. And then it's immediately followed by the I may be dead, but I'm still pretty, which is more than I can say for you line. And then the most appropriate line for us to be excited about.
Of course.
You were destined to die. It was written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Like, everything the Master says, she immediately has something to come back with.
Yes.
And it's, like, so quick and flawless every time. She just exudes confidence in that moment.
Yeah. And he does the kind of trance thing and pulls her to him again. And she tells him, and save the hypnosis crap for the tourists. And basically throws him through the window of the library, where he lands on a giant jagged piece of wood.
And then the special
goes to ashes.
Effects budget is depleted.
Yes. And he goes to ash except for his skeleton, which is unlike other vampires. And when that happens, all the monsters basically just sink back into the Hellmouth, and the vampires kind of disperse.
Vampires peace out.
Yeah. And then there's a scene that is cut where it says Colin stands looking toward the school. He's vaguely disappointed. Then he shrugs and turns and heads back toward the trees.
Oh, I would have liked that scene.
Yeah. He's just like, oh, didn't work.
Oh, well.
And
okay.
Yeah. Buffy, Xander, and Angel come down, and we have everyone all gathered together in the library.
This is the scene where I really, like, focused on Buffy, because she's, like, crying this entire scene. Like, it's very soft tears, like, it's just kind of watery eyes, but, like, the entire time, she's just an emotional wreck.
Yeah.
And is so fixated on the bones. And that line, even towards the end, where she's like, he's not going anywhere, loser. Like, I feel like this ties in so well to when she was bad. Like, way more than I was thinking previously. Like, she feels different from this last little bit since she was brought back. And yeah, like the emotional weight of what she just went through, and how this entire last scene, you can just look at her and see her eyes are constantly watering, like she's constantly on the brink of breaking down again after breaking down so many times during this episode. And I'm just like, dang, that's some acting chops there. Like, there's so many layers to that.
There really is. And they decide they save the world. They're going to go party.
And the final of the 3 beats, as they're walking out and all chitter-chattering, Angel looks over at Buffy and says, by the way, I really like your dress.
And Buffy replies, yeah, it was a big hit with everyone. Something very interesting, though, those lines are not in the script.
Oh.
And so I looked it up in the Watcher's Guide. That's kind of like a little guide to each episode.
Uh-huh.
They improvised those.
Nice.
That was not planned. They did that.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that awesome?
Any of that chitter chatter in there?
Yes, I was going to say that too. All of that chitter chatter is in there. And I can tell you what each person actually said.
Okay.
They walk out all talking at once. Giles says, I'm not dancing though. Miss Calendar, we'll see about that.
Okay.
Xander, so what's the story with the car? Cordelia, oh, that was me saving the day. Buffy, I'm hungry. Is anyone else hungry? I'm really hungry.
Yeah.
Willow, you can come with us, Angel, get something to drink. Or, no, don't do that. You can just hang out. But yeah, those were the comments of each person as they were leaving. Well, there we go. Prophecy Girl.
Prophecy Girl, season 1.
Yes.
Oh man, season 1. Prophecy Girl is an awesome episode, but it's also like an episode that I feel like is crafted in such a way that I don't have a lot to say about it. I mean, we still talked for a long time, but I really like thinking about it going into this episode. I was just like, what am I going to say about this episode that hasn't already been said 1,000 times over? Like, it really comes down to this episode. It's good. It's good with the writing. It kind of concludes the story and everything like that. But it comes down to me, Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance is just so phenomenal in this episode. And it's got really good acting all around. But Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance is just so next level that I think part of the reason I love this episode so much is just because of how well acted it is.
This is, in my opinion, the best episode in season 1. I won't claim that it is, as an episode as a whole, one of the like top 10, but that the scene where Buffy overhears that the prophecy says she's going to die is one of my top 10 scenes in Buffy.
I could definitely see that. And like I said, it's not even an episode I get mad at people for putting in their top 10. Like, I think it's good enough that I could see the justification of putting it in some top 10. Because I think when you're watching through the series, this is probably the first episode that a lot of people really connect with, like really truly connect with. And I know a lot of it has to do with that scene that you're talking about. Like, that scene is just so emotional and feels so important and opens your eyes and reminds you of just what Buffy is dealing with at the age of 16, what the stakes really are. And so I think for a lot of people, this episode is very significant because it's that first moment of being like, oh, this is that type of show.
Yeah. I do have some questions about closure for this episode.
Okay.
Like, so they all leave to go to the prom. Do they take Cordelia's car? Do they just like back it out of the school? And if they don't, do they go back and get it before it's found? Because like somebody's going to stumble on the school and see that a car was driven through it. And like there's a skeleton in the library.
Yeah.
I mean, like they're just walking off and leaving all this here, thinking no one else is going to find it. Because I'm guessing even in Sunnydale, there'd be an investigation about someone driving a car through the school.
My gut is they took Cordelia's car that night. They dealt with the bones the next day. That seems like a Sunday afternoon chore, dealing with the master's bones, like getting that kind of cleaned up and packed away and ready to bury later on in the summer whenever they did the ritual stuff.
And I get that, but there's a hole in the side of the school. Like someone's gonna see that and like investigate it and find a skeleton in the library. Like, I don't know. I don't think a hole in the side of the school was going to go unnoticed for that long.
I always go back to that line that Snyder says in season 2 or whatever he says it, where it's just like, the police in this town are deeply stupid.
Yeah.
Like, yep. All right, so next week we'll be back with the very first episode of season 2, which is When She Was Bad, and I'm so excited to start season 2. I cannot wait for that. Season 2 may not be the best season of Buffy, but I would argue that it may be the most Buffy season of Buffy. But we'll get into that when we actually start going episode by episode. with that being said, we're gonna say bye.
Bye.
Good job, Kim. I'm proud of you.
What are you proud of me for?
For saying bye. You did so good.
Actually, as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, that was way too cheery.